The heavy green tail of Cadet Thraxel swung through the air with a deep metallic hum. He charged forward, his massive feet cracking the training floor mats under the extra force of the high-gravity room. He reached out his three-clawed hands to trap the small human girl against the bulkhead. He failed. Jess did not look up as the 270-kilogram reptilian closed the distance. Her right hand dropped down to her left wrist, her fingers tapping against a band of black elastic as the heavy shadow fell over her frame. The 60 elite alien cadets watching from behind the safety glass leaned closer, their scales and feathers rustling in anticipation of the impact. They wanted to see the small exchange biped get smashed into the wall. I thought her mass report was a systemic glitch. It wasn't. You will want to watch how fast our entire Marshal Registry fell apart. Stay close. 13 hours earlier, I stood at the main console of the Sector 4 Marshal Registry and pressed the activation key for Sparring Cell 7. The gravity generators rumbled, shifting the internal pressure of the room to exactly 1.4 times Earth standard. Blue chitin flakes shed from my defensive ridge as I reviewed the daily roster. My shift had already lasted too long, and my crystalline joints clicked with a sharp metallic clatter every time I reached for a data slate. The registry had maintained a perfect record for over 400 cycles, without a single training fatality. That record was the only thing keeping my administrative license secure. Then the side hatch slid open, and Jess walked into the high-gravity cell. She wore no standard reactive polymer armor and carried no honor blades. She was a short-statured biped wearing a pair of heavy leather boots and a gray cotton tank top that revealed unsculpted, flat forearms. She stopped in the center of the ring, her lower jaw moving in a slow circle as she chewed on a pink strip of mint polymer. "Instructor Vren," Thraxel rumbled, his middle eye focusing sharply on the human biped. "Is this the entity we are meant to integrate into our vanguard line? I have seen planetary rodents with more structural presence." "Asset Jess is a representative of the Terran Coalition," I said, my vocal synthesizer keeping a flat tone despite the clicking of my jaw. "She is scheduled for a non-kinetic baseline evaluation. She will remain on the perimeter." "With respect, Instructor," hissed Cadet Krell, a scarred Gorgoron standing directly behind Thraxel. "The code of the hub allows for a kinetic verification match if an unrated species enters an active cell. We wish to test her compliance metrics. Or is the little biped too fragile to survive the touch of an academician?" The entire cohort began to hiss and click their mandibles in agreement from the upper viewing decks. They saw her tiny mass as a direct insult to the Academy's ancient martial prestige. I looked down at my diagnostic screen to check her active stress response. Her heart rate remained at a flat, uninspired 68 beats per minute. Her breathing was slow. My automated console filed this complete lack of a defensive reaction under low-tier responsiveness. I assumed she was simply too uneducated in galactic close-quarters combat to understand the danger of the three massive predators standing before her. "Asset Jess," I called out, stepping toward the boundary line of the active gravity field. "The regulations permit a non-lethal verification bout if requested by the cohort. Do you accept the challenge, or do you wish to sign an administrative waiver based on your structural variance?" Jess stopped chewing for a split second. She looked at Thraxel's heavy claws, then at the two other large Gorgorons who had stepped into the sparring ring behind him. "They want to go?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, entirely lacking the deep bass of a recognized warrior species. "They wish to verify your skeletal resilience," I replied. "I have a scheduled meal break in 12 minutes, she murmured, using her hand to wipe a small smudge of grease from her forearm onto her cotton trousers. "Let's keep it quick." The silver-skinned Valari tacticians on the observation deck immediately began tapping on their ledger slates, rapidly shifting the digital betting odds to 410 to 1 against the human. The cohort believed the ring's containment fields would preserve her life, but they expected her bones to break before the automated stasis foam could deploy. I reached for the primary control panel and signed the digital waiver. "The match is authorized," I announced. "Non-lethal combat protocols are now active. Begin." Thraxel moved instantly. His textbook acceleration generated thousands of newtons of initial thrust, allowing his reptilian bulk to close the 4-meter distance in less than half a second. His heavy 3-clawed arms reached out to lock around her neck and end the bout immediately. Krell and Vrost lunged forward right behind him, effectively cutting off her lateral escape routes. It was a flawless multi-agent kinetic trap that had maintained a 98% dominance rating across 3 stellar cycles. Jess did not take a defensive stance. She did not retreat toward the safety sensors. Instead, she stepped forward directly into the path of the oncoming mass. Mid-step, her right hand pulled the thick black elastic band from her left wrist. She gathered her dark hair behind her neck with a single rhythmic motion and snapped the band into place to clear her sightlines. Her left boot planted onto the high-gravity mat with a sharp metallic crack that echoed through the ventilation grates. She ducked beneath Thraxel's extended arms, entering the exact center of his velocity vector, and placed her small palms flat against the side of his primary hip joint. She did not attempt to lift his weight. She merely applied a subtle 7-degree lateral tilt to his momentum. A heavy mass moving at full speed under high gravity cannot compensate for a sudden vector shift. Thraxel's 3 eyes went wide as his body bypassed Jess entirely. His heavy frame sailed sideways, completely out of control, and targeted the eastern bulkhead. He struck the 4-inch thick titanium wall with a massive crash that caused the observation glass to vibrate violently in its tracks. The impact registered as a massive spike on my console screen. Before his bulk could even begin to slide down to the floor mats, Jess had already spun on her heel to face the remaining targets. Cadet Krell reacted on instinct, launching a sweeping low strike with his heavy armored tail. The blow was fast enough to snap the landing gear of a standard atmospheric shuttle. Jess did not jump over the incoming strike. She simply stepped inside the arc of the swing, her body moving with a fluid stillness that seemed to ignore the extra gravity entirely. She caught Krell's primary trailing wrist with her bare hand. She did not pull against his weight. She twisted her hips, dropped her center of mass by 3 inches, and applied a leverage technique that treated the Gorgoron's dense skeletal structure like a simple wooden stick. The wrist joint subluxated with a loud pop. Krell reeled as the pain response flared through his neural cluster, but before he could emit an auditory cry, Jess's right boot drove directly into the soft tissue behind his knee. His massive bulk tilted forward. With a casual, rhythmic swing that looked like an agricultural worker handling a heavy sack of grain, she guided his descending head straight into the path of the oncoming Cadet Vrost. The 2 heavy reptilians collided with a wet crunch of scales and bone. Their combined momentum carried them sideways across the ring. Jess provided a single polite nudge against Vrost's shoulder blade to ensure they did not sprawl onto the center mat, guiding their tumbling mass cleanly toward the opposite side of the room. They hit the reinforced western bulkhead simultaneously. The sound of the impact rattled the console deck. The diagnostic panel in front of my claws erupted into a bright crimson flash as 3 independent trauma alerts populated the interface. The automated stasis fields failed to deploy their protective foam because her physical movements had registered completely outside the system's standard close-quarters combat parameters. The total elapsed duration of the combat registered on the timer at exactly 2.68 seconds. An absolute, suffocating silence settled over the Sector 4 training hub. The 60 observing specialists froze behind the safety glass, their betting slates drifting loose from their hands as the updated registries wiped out every credit line. Thraxel remained slumped against the eastern bulkhead, his middle eye twitching rhythmically as a small stream of blue fluid trickled from his nostril. Krell and Vrost lay piled on top of one another against the western wall, their heavy tails twitching like dead electrical cables on the mat. In the center of the ring, Jess stood completely unbothered. Her heart rate had peaked briefly before returning to its steady, uninspired crawl. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the wrapped plastic casing, and neatly tucked her pink polymer mint back inside before securing her woven clothing. She walked slowly toward the exit hatch, her rubber boots making a soft squeaking sound against the splattered floor mats. As she passed beneath my monitoring partition, she paused and looked up through the thick reinforced glass. Her face held no anger, no triumph, and no malice. "Instructor Vren," she said, her voice completely level through the intercom. "I think your wall is dented. You might want to get that looked at before the next class." The pneumatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, and she vanished down the corridor toward the main mess hall. My blue crystalline carapace let out a frantic, scattered clatter as my trembling claws accessed the primary network database. I did not log a system error. I did not call for an administrative investigation into the match. I simply accessed the sector's close quarters tactical registry, deleted the foundational manuals that had governed our training for 300 generations, and began typing a new strategic directive into the permanent file. The thick black elastic hair tie remained resting on the floor of Sparring Cell 7, glinting beneath the harsh halogen lights like a dark monument. None of the senior cadets touched it. Strength that chooses gentleness is not weakness. It is wisdom. Never look a Terran in the eye when they stop chewing.